January 17, 1945. The frozen plains of eastern Belgium stretched endlessly beneath a pale winter sky. Snow fell in heavy curtains, muffling the thunder of distant artillery. Near the village of Beth, a lone American Sherman tank sat motionless in a shallow depression, its hull tilted at an awkward angle. The crew inside had stopped counting the metallic clangs that echoed through the steel walls. Each impact sent vibrations through their bones, some glancing off harmlessly, others leaving deep scars in the armor. The loader, a 20-year-old from Ohio, pressed his gloved hand against the cold interior wall and whispered a prayer he'd learned in childhood. Outside, German Panther and Tiger tanks prowled like wolves circling wounded prey, their commanders growing more frustrated with each failed shot. The Sherman, nicknamed Iron Guardian by its crew, refused to die. Smoke poured from its engine vents, hydraulic fluid leaked onto the frozen ground. Yet, the turrets still turned and the main guns still fired. This was not supposed to happen. German tank doctrine, honed through years of Eastern Front brutality, taught that American Shermans were mobile coffins, thin-skinned, undergunned, and easily destroyed. But on this particular afternoon, in this particular corner of Belgium, one tank began to rewrite the rules. The Sherman medium tank had never been designed to be invincible. When American engineers first drew up specifications in 1940, their priorities reflected a different kind of war, a war of mobility, mass production, and logistical superiority. The M4 Sherman weighed 30 tons, carried a 75mm main gun, and featured frontal armor barely 2 inches thick in most places. German Tigers, by contrast, boasted nearly 4 inches of sloped steel and mounted the legendary 88mm cannon that could punch through Allied armor at ranges exceeding a mile. On paper, the Sherman was outmatched. In the tank graveyards of Normandy and the Ardennes, dozens of burned-out hulks testified to this imbalance. American tankers developed dark humor about their vehicles, calling them Ronsons, a reference to the cigarette lighter company's slogan, "Lights first time, every time." Yet beneath the gallows jokes lay a deeper truth that German intelligence consistently underestimated. American armor doctrine never relied on individual tank superiority. It relied on something far more insidious: numerical abundance, mechanical reliability, and the industrial capacity to replace losses faster than the enemy could inflict them. The German commanders surrounding Iron Guardian that January afternoon expected a quick kill. They had positioned 2 Panthers and a Tiger in a semicircle, creating overlapping fields of fire that should have turned the Sherman into scrap metal within minutes. The first shot, fired at 350 meters by a Panther, struck the turret's right side with the sound like a church bell struck by a sledgehammer. The armor-piercing round should have penetrated, should have ignited the ammunition stored along the turret's interior walls. Instead, the shell ricocheted upward at a 40-degree angle, leaving a crater the size of a dinner plate but failing to breach the inner hull. The German gunner, a veteran of Kursk and Kharkov, felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He had never seen a Sherman deflect a shot at such close range. His commander barked orders to fire again. The second shot hit the glacis plate, the sloped frontal armor protecting the driver and bow gunner. Another ricochet. A third shot targeted the suspension, hoping to immobilize the vehicle. The track absorbed the impact, links scattering like broken chain, but the Sherman's engine continued running. By the 8th shot, the German crews began to suspect they were facing something beyond standard American armor. They were correct, though not in the way they imagined. Iron Guardian was no prototype, no experimental heavy tank smuggled to the front lines. It was a factory-standard M4A3E8 Sherman, the variant American troops called the Easy 8, equipped with wet ammunition storage and horizontal volute spring suspension. What made it extraordinary was not exotic engineering,
but American industrial philosophy applied with ruthless precision. Every weld had been inspected twice. Every armor plate had been heat-treated to exact specifications at the Chrysler Tank Arsenal in Detroit. The suspension components came from a General Motors plant in Ohio that produced parts with tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. The crew's periscopes, radio equipment, and fire control systems had been manufactured by companies that peacetime made camera lenses, radios for living rooms, and surveying equipment for civil engineers. This was not craftsmanship in the European sense. No master artisan had hand-fitted the transmission or personally ground the armor plates. This was something new. Mass production, refined to the point where quality became quantifiable, predictable, repeatable across thousands of identical units. German tankers fought in vehicles built by skilled laborers working under increasingly desperate conditions, using materials of declining quality, in factories bombed regularly by Allied air forces. American tankers fought in vehicles built by assembly lines that never stopped, fed by a supply chain stretching from Pennsylvania steel mills to Texas oil refineries to Minnesota iron mines, all untouched by enemy action, all operating at maximum capacity. The Germans fired again. Shot number 12 struck the turret bustle, where the radio and auxiliary equipment nestled. The impact knocked out communications, filling the crew compartment with the smell of burning insulation. Shot 15 hit the engine deck, punching through the thin rear armor and starting a small fire in the engine compartment. The driver engaged the automatic fire suppression system, a simple but effective setup using carbon dioxide cylinders that German tanks lacked. The flames died within seconds. Shot 19 shattered the periscope assembly, blinding the commander to anything outside his narrow vision slit. Shot 23 destroyed the main gun's recoil mechanism, rendering the 76mm cannon temporarily inoperable. Yet Iron Guardian did not burn. It did not explode. The crew, concussed and bleeding from various minor wounds, remained alive inside their battered fortress. The loader methodically cleared a jam in the ammunition feed. The gunner worked to manually traverse the turret, counting degrees by feel since the power traverse motor had failed. The bow gunner, blood running from a cut above his eye, kept his .30 caliber machine gun aimed at the tree line where German infantry might emerge. They did not panic. They had been trained at Fort Knox in Kentucky, where instructors drilled them endlessly on damage control procedures, where mock battles taught them to fight their tank until it became unsalvageable. They knew the statistics that the average Sherman crew had a 70% chance of surviving a knocked-out tank, far higher than German or Soviet crews. This knowledge, hammered into them during months of training, kept them functional when instinct screamed to abandon the vehicle. What the German commanders could not see, hidden by snow and smoke, was that Iron Guardian had not survived alone. 400 meters to the east, partially concealed in a woodline, an American tank destroyer watched through its rangefinder. The M10 Wolverine, mounting a high-velocity 3-inch gun, had been waiting for the German armor to reveal its positions. The moment the Panthers and Tiger committed to killing the Sherman, they exposed their flanks. The M10's crew, trained specifically for the ambush role, fired 3 shots.
The first penetrated a Panther's side armor, detonating the ammunition and turning the vehicle into a crematorium for its crew. The second disabled the Tiger's track and transmission, leaving it immobile and vulnerable. The third missed, but achieved its purpose, forcing the surviving German tanks to withdraw under smoke before American artillery, already being called in by forward observers, turned the battlefield into a killing ground. Iron Guardian had never been meant to win a duel. It had been meant to survive long enough for the American system, the combined arms doctrine of tanks, tank destroyers, artillery, and air support, to overwhelm the enemy through coordinated firepower. The Germans had focused on the tank itself, never realizing they were fighting an entire industrial ecosystem.
When recovery crews reached Iron Guardian 3 hours later, they counted 74 separate impact marks on the hull and turret. 14 had been direct hits from armor-piercing rounds. 60 were from high-explosive shells, machine gun bullets, and fragments from near-miss artillery. The front glacis bore 17 separate craters, some overlapping. The turret looked as though it had been hammered by a giant blacksmith. Yet, when the recovery officer climbed inside, he found the crew alive, still at their stations, and the engines still capable of running. The transmission had survived. The final drive assemblies, though damaged, remained functional. This single tank, transported back to a depot in France for analysis, became a case study in American armor design philosophy. Engineers photographed every damaged component. Metallurgists tested armor samples to verify heat treatment quality. Ordnance specialists examined how the ammunition storage, submerged in water glycol jackets to prevent fires, had saved the crew from the fate of so many other Sherman tankers. The reports generated from this analysis influenced post-war tank design, not just in America, but in Britain and France. They validated decisions made 3 years earlier by men who had never seen combat but understood manufacturing tolerances, quality control, and the mathematics of protection versus weight. The German army had built its armored doctrine around the concept of qualitative superiority. Each tank a carefully crafted weapon, each crew extensively trained, each engagement planned to maximize the advantage of superior firepower and armor. This philosophy worked brilliantly in 1939 when German Panthers crushed Polish cavalry and French heavy tanks. It worked adequately in 1941 when logistical preparation and tactical surprise carried Wehrmacht forces to the gates of Moscow. By 1943, it was faltering. By 1945, it was irrelevant. Not because German engineering had failed. The Panther remained an excellent medium tank, the Tiger a fearsome heavy tank, but because German industry could not produce them in sufficient numbers to replace combat losses. Each Panther required 55,000 man-hours to build. Each Sherman required 10,000. The Panther's Maybach engine, a masterpiece of precision engineering, demanded rare materials and skilled machinists. The Sherman's engine came from a Continental Motors plant that had previously built radial engines for civilian aircraft, using manufacturing techniques designed for rapid production and easy maintenance. When a Sherman's engine failed, the crew removed it in 4 hours using standard wrenches and installed a replacement from a depot that stocked thousands. When a Panther's engine failed, the tank often remained dead until specialized recovery teams could reach it, if such teams still existed, if fuel for the recovery vehicles could be found, if the frontline situation permitted such operations.
The crew of Iron Guardian never considered themselves heroes. When reporters reached them a week later, hoping for dramatic quotes, they shrugged and spoke about training, about luck, about the quality of the tank's construction. The commander, a 24-year-old lieutenant from Michigan, mentioned that he had toured the Chrysler Arsenal before shipping overseas. He had watched assembly lines where tanks rolled off the production floor every 30 minutes, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. He had seen quality control inspectors reject entire batches of armor plate because hardness tests revealed inconsistencies. He understood, in a way the reporters could not quite grasp, that his survival had been determined not by individual heroism, but by institutional competence, by a manufacturing system that treated quality as non-negotiable, by a military bureaucracy that stockpiled spare parts with obsessive thoroughness, by a national economy capable of producing both overwhelming quantity and acceptable quality simultaneously. This was not the story the reporters wanted. They wanted tales of American courage triumphing over German technical superiority. They got instead a story about industrial capacity, about training programs, about the unglamorous mathematics of warfare in the 20th century. Yet there was a deeper symbolism in Iron Guardian's survival, one that transcended production statistics and metallurgical reports. Scattered throughout the tank's interior, amid spent shell casings and hydraulic fluid stains, the recovery crews found small personal items that spoke to something the Germans had never quite understood about American soldiers. A photograph of a girlfriend, carefully wrapped in oilcloth and tucked behind the gunner's seat.
a battered copy of the Saturday Evening Post, its pages stained but still readable, a tin of chocolate bars, partially melted from engine heat but still edible, which the crew had shared evenly despite the stress of combat. These were not the tokens of fanatics willing to die for an ideology. These were the belongings of ordinary young men who expected to survive, who planned to go home, who carried with them the assumption that their lives had value beyond their utility to the state. German tankers fought with extraordinary courage, often to the point of suicidal determination, because their training emphasized duty, honor, and sacrifice for the Vaterland. American tankers fought with equal courage but different expectations. They expected to win, to survive, and to return to lives that mattered more than military glory. This distinction shaped everything from tank design to tactical doctrine. A Sherman crew that abandoned a disabled tank was not disgraced. They were following doctrine, preserving trained manpower for the next battle. A German crew that abandoned a disabled Panther risked court-martial for cowardice. The Americans designed their tanks with escape hatches, fire suppression systems, and ammunition storage that prioritized crew survival. The Germans designed theirs for maximum combat effectiveness, with crew survivability as secondary concern. Both approaches reflected the values of their societies, one that could replace tanks more easily than trained crews, one that increasingly could replace neither.
By war's end, American factories had produced nearly 50,000 Sherman tanks. German factories produced approximately 6,000 Panthers and 1,400 Tigers. These numbers told only part of the story. The other part lay in the infrastructure behind those numbers. The training facilities that graduated tank crews by the thousand, the supply depots that stocked everything from entire engines to individual spark plugs, the repair battalions that could rebuild a damaged tank in days rather than weeks, the merchant marine that delivered all of this to frontline units regardless of submarine attacks or winter storms. Iron Guardian survived 70 hits, not because it was impervious, but because it was part of a system designed for attrition warfare, a system that accepted losses as inevitable, but ensured that those losses could be sustained, replaced, and ultimately overcome through sheer material superiority. The Germans had hoped to win through technical excellence and tactical brilliance. The Americans won through industrial depth and logistical competence. Both approaches were valid militarily. Only one was sustainable economically. The German crews who fought against Iron Guardian that January afternoon were not incompetent. They were veterans, skilled in their trade, equipped with tanks that were objectively superior in armor and firepower. They did everything their training and doctrine demanded. They engaged at favorable range, they concentrated their fire, they targeted weak points. Yet they failed. Not because of any mistake they made, but because they were fighting an enemy that approached warfare from a fundamentally different philosophical foundation. American armor doctrine never assumed that individual vehicles would win duels. It assumed that superior numbers, coordinated tactics, and uninterrupted supply lines would overwhelm any localized German advantage. Iron Guardian's survival was not a miracle. It was a statistical inevitability in a war where America produced one tank for every German tank, truck for every German horse-drawn wagon, artillery shell for every German shell, and did so while maintaining quality standards that German industry, strangled by material shortages and strategic bombing, could no longer match. The frozen battlefield near Beth, with its burned-out Panthers and battered but functional Sherman, became a microcosm of the entire Western Front in early 1945. German excellence rendered irrelevant by American abundance. When historians later examined the engagement, they noted that Iron Guardian had been struck by rounds from 3 different German vehicles over a period of 90 minutes. Some of those rounds had been fired from distances where penetration should have been guaranteed. The fact that the Sherman survived became a subject of analysis in military journals for decades. Metallurgists discovered that the armor, though not thick by late war standards, had been manufactured with a nickel-chrome alloy that provided superior toughness compared to earlier rolled homogeneous armor.
The sloped glacis, copied from Soviet T-34 design principles, increased effective thickness by nearly 40% against projectiles fired from typical engagement angles. The wet ammunition storage, initially resisted by Army ordnance as an unnecessary complication, had prevented at least 3 potential catastrophic detonations. Each of these features represented lessons learned from earlier failures, incorporated into production through an industrial system capable of implementing design changes across thousands of vehicles within months. German tanks, by contrast, suffered from constant design modifications that were never standardized across production runs, creating a maintenance nightmare where spare parts from one Panther might not fit another Panther built at a different factory or during a different production period.
The symbolic weight of that battered Sherman extended beyond technical analysis. For the German soldiers who witnessed its refusal to die, Iron Guardian represented something profoundly demoralizing: the recognition that they were not fighting an inferior enemy. German propaganda had spent years assuring soldiers that American troops were soft, that American equipment was shoddy, that American industrial might was exaggerated by Jews and communists. Every engagement that contradicted this narrative, every Sherman that survived what should have been a killing blow, every artillery barrage that obliterated German positions with tonnage no European nation could match, every supply drop that delivered hot food and ammunition to frontline troops with clockwork regularity, eroded the Wehrmacht's will to resist. The German army in early 1945 still contained units capable of extraordinary tactical performance. What it lacked was hope. The soldiers could see American tanks being replaced within days of their destruction. They could hear American artillery firing without apparent concern for ammunition expenditure. They could watch American aircraft fill the skies without any Luftwaffe response. And they understood, with the bitter clarity that comes from combat experience, that they were fighting a nation that could afford to lose battles and still win the war. For the American crew of Iron Guardian, the experience carried a different lesson. They had followed their training, maintained discipline under fire, and trusted the equipment provided by a nation they might never fully understand. The loader from Ohio, who had worked in his father's hardware store before the war, marveled at how the tank's designers had thought to include a fire suppression system, a detail that saved his life. The gunner from Louisiana, who had barely graduated high school, appreciated the simplicity of the gun controls, designed so that even panicked hands could operate them. The driver from New York, son of Jewish immigrants who had fled Europe, took grim satisfaction in knowing that the diesel engine beneath him had been built by workers in Detroit who would never see combat but were no less essential to victory. Each man carried home a shard of understanding about what their country had accomplished, not merely winning a war, but transforming warfare itself into an industrial process where victory came not from heroic charges or brilliant generalship, but from factories that never stopped, ships that crossed oceans despite submarines, and a society wealthy enough to arm its soldiers lavishly while its civilians endured only minor rationing. Years later, when Iron Guardian was displayed at the Patton Museum of Cavalry and Armor in Kentucky, visitors would run their hands over the scarred turret and ask guides how it survived. The guides would explain the metallurgy, the design features, the tactical situation. They would mention that the crew survived unscathed except for minor injuries. They would note that the tank was eventually repaired and returned to service, fighting through the final weeks of the war before being shipped home. But the deeper answer, the one that could not fit on a museum placard, required understanding a moment in history when American industry reached a zenith of productive capacity that would never be replicated, when factories built not for profit but for national survival, when workers labored overtime without complaint because their sons and brothers depended on the quality of their work, when an entire economy mobilized toward a singular goal and achieved what seemed impossible. Iron Guardian's survival was not the story of one tank. It was the story of a nation that learned, for a brief historical moment, to focus all its considerable resources on a task and execute that task with a competence that bordered on the terrifying.
On that frozen January afternoon in Belgium, as snow continued to fall and the surviving German tanks withdrew into the gathering darkness, the crew of Iron Guardians sat in silence inside their battered fortress. They were alive. Their tank, though damaged, remained operational. In the distance, they could hear American voices as infantry moved up to secure the position.
Soon, recovery vehicles would arrive. Soon, they would be pulled back to a rear area for rest, hot food, and letters from home. The Midwest farm boy, the Southern mechanic, the New York immigrant son, none of them philosophers, none of them historians, shared a cigarette and understood without needing words that they had witnessed something important. They had been the anvil upon which German excellence broke itself. They had been the proof that quantity has a quality all its own when paired with sufficient competence. And they had been, for 90 crucial minutes, the living embodiment of American industrial democracy. Ordinary men, adequately trained, sufficiently equipped, and confident that their society valued their lives enough to give them a fighting chance. That was the secret German doctrine never solved. That was the advantage no amount of superior engineering could overcome. That was why one tank survived 70 hits and lived to tell the tale.